This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Bereshus, the Rosh Kollel Shlita, Rav Wurzberger, Yedidi, Rav Donovan Shlita. I was very relieved that introducing me, there was a great chiddush that came to the world, that even just sitting in a Beis HaMedrash is a mitzvah, because I was wondering what would the tayeles be for the next 30 minutes. But I was relieved to hear that just sitting in a Beis HaMedrash also has value. Shenemar Ashrei Yoshrei Veisecha Oid Yehalalu Chasela Paskins the Ramah. In fact, many people like to advertise their amaratzas, because Ramah says that if you come into a shul and you don't know how to learn, so what do? You sit down. So people come to a shul and they sit down, ki'ilu, they don't even know a pasuk in Chumash. Lechatchila, you don't sit down in a shul. Lechatchila, you say a pasuk. It's only if you don't know a pasuk, then you sit down. Shenemar Ashrei Yoshev Esacha. Says the Torah Akdoisha in this week's Parsha, Es Hashem Elokecha Tira. Fear the Rebbeinu Shalom. But there's an extra word. The Torah says the word Es. Says the Gemara Psachim Adav Chaf Beis, Shimon Hu Amsuni, V'amri La Nechemya Hu Amsuni. Hayadoiresh Kol Esin Shabbatayra. Shimon Hu Amsuni had a shita. He had a mahalach. He wrote a sefer. You know, there are a lot of svarim today. You could get a sefer on almost every topic. I have a sefer, Check Bahalacha. You know, you could get a sefer, Mida Keneged Mida, I think 3 volumes already. So he wrote a sefer, Esin Shabbatayra. Rather, they have a sefer today, Esin Shabbatayra. That was his shita. Kivan shehigia liyes Hashem Elokecha piresh. When he got to the pasuk, Es Hashem Elokecha tira, he separated. He stopped. He gave up. He said there's nothing to expound on the pasuk, Es Hashem Elokecha tira. Who else possibly would one have to fear other than the Rebbeinu Shalom? Amrulai Talmida of Rebbi Kollel Shadarashta Matei Alein. What are you going to do with your whole life's work? You've been darshaning the Essen your entire life. What's going to be with the other thousands of Essen in the Torah? Amar lohem kishem shekibalti schar al hadrisha kach ani mekabel schar al aprisha. I darshaned, I was amel, I was yogeya, and I got schar for darshaning, and now I'm being peiresh. I was wrong. I'm moida ala emes. Every single shiur I ever gave in my whole life was sheker v'chazav. I'm peiresh. I was wrong. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva v'darash es Hashem Elokecha tira l'rabbis talmidei chachamim. Rabbi Akiva said, wait a second. There's someone else who you need to fear almost on par with the Rebbeinu Shalom, and that's a Talmid Chacham. First thing we have to address, what's the machlekes? What's the nekudas ha-machlekes? Shimon HaAmsuni knew that you could possibly say that Es Hashem Elokecha tira is coming to say not only do you need to fear the Rebbeinu Shalom, you need to fear Tamei Chacham, but he decided that you can't say that. Probably Shimon HaAmsuni felt, how could you put a Talmid Chacham on par with the Rebbeinu Shalom? But Rabbi Akiva argued, so what's the nekudas ha-machlekes over here? Furthermore, there are a lot of Tanoim out there. You have Rav Meir, you have Rav Tarfon, you have Rav Gamliel. Nobody else had the gumption to stand up in the Beis HaMedrash and say, you know what? Es Hashem Elokecha tira is the rabbis talmidei chachamim. Only Rabbi Akiva. Why dafka Rabbi Akiva? The Dubna Magid in Tu Mekayimos quotes the Goin, and he says a very big chiddush to pshat in this Gemara. The Magid in Parshas Tazria and Parshas Ekev. The Magid said when he was in Vilna, he once asked the Goin the following question. How is it possible for an individual to influence someone else? Just because I say something, someone else is going to change? Just because I teach something, will that really have an effect on another person? And the Goin said, Taka, nobody's listening. Nobody cares what you say. Whatever you say goes in one ear and right out the other. You can't really affect somebody through regular education. It says the Goin, the way it works is as follows. If a person is mashlim themselves, if a person works on themselves, if a person fills themselves up so much with Yiras Shamayim to the point where there's more of it to go around, says the Gaon, a person is like a kli, and you fill yourself up with Yiras Shamayim more and more and more. So then those who are associated with you, and those who are surrounding you, and those who are connected to you, it rubs off on them. You pour it into yourself, and it overflows to those around you. Says the Vilna Gaon, Pshat in the Gemara. The Gemara asks it on another pasuk in the Parsha. V'ato Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha shoyel me'imach kiyim liyira. All the Rebbeinu Shalom asks of you is to fear Him. In fact, the Gemara in Bracha is Yira milsa zutra sahi. Is Yiras Shamayim a small thing? And the Gemara says, yeah. L'gabe Moshe milsa zutra sahi. To Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a small thing. So the question everybody asks is very good. It's a small thing for Moshe Rabbeinu, but Moshe Rabbeinu is not talking to himself. He's talking to his Talmidim. He's talking to Klal Yisrael. How could Moshe Rabbeinu turn to Klal Yisrael and say, Ma Hashem Elokecha shoyel me'imach? All the Rebbeinu Shalom asks of you is Yiras Shamayim. Yeah, it's easy for me, but it's hard for you. Would it be an effective methodology for a teacher to turn to students and said, look, this is a piece of cake for me. I know it's hard for you, but since it's easy for me, it should be easy for you as well. Why does that follow? Says the Gaon, the Pshat in the Gemara, is that since Yiras Shamayim is easy for Moshe Rabbeinu, then for those who associate with Moshe Rabbeinu, for those who are surrounding Moshe Rabbeinu, for those who are Talmidim of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's easy for those who are in the circles of Moshe Rabbeinu, because all Moshe Rabbeinu has to do is fill himself up, and the Mela, the Yiras Shamayim, will overflow for those who are associated with him. Says the Dubna Magid, a Chiddush in the Gemara in Pesachim, Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva v'darash es Hashem Elokecha tira l'Rabbis Talmidei Chachamim. Es Hashem Elokecha tira. You need to fear the Rebbeinu Shalom. Can you do it? Not really. Is it easy? It's impossible. There's only one way to fear the Rebbeinu Shalom. L'Rabbis Talmidei Chachamim. You have to hang around Talmidei Chachamim. You have to associate with Talmidei Chachamim. You have to mingle with the right people. Taka, if a person says, you know what, I'm going to sit in the Beis HaMedrash, and I'm going to learn by myself, in my own Dalet Amos, V'sholem alayich nafshi. I don't need a Rebbi, I don't need a Rav, I don't need a Rosh Hashiva. I'm going to learn. What could be bad? What am I missing? Says the Gemara, you're missing Yiras Shamayim. Because there's only one way to get Yiras Shamayim. As Hashem Elokecha tira, says the Dubna Magid, l'Rabbis Talmidei Chachamim. You need to hang around the right people. You need to associate with the right people. If you hang around the right people, it's easy for Moshe, so it will be easy for you. That's how the Dubna Magid learns the Gemara Pesachim. As Hashem Elokecha tira, l'Rabbis Talmidei Chachamim. And what's the Nekudas HaMachloikis over here? So Shimon HaMsuni says, no. There's no way you need to fear a Talmud Chacham the way you fear the Rebbeinu Shalom. There's no Talmud Chacham on par with the Rebbeinu Shalom. But Rabbi Akiva said, yes. You need to fear a Talmud Chacham similar to the way you fear the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Rav Gifter would say over from his Rebbi, from the Talza Rav, an incredible pshat. Rabbi Akiva was sitting in the Beis HaMedrash, and Rabbi Akiva was breaking his head, trying to figure out, as Hashem Elokecha tira, what is it Bala Rabbis? He couldn't figure it out. None of the Tanaim could figure it out. Shimon HaMsuni couldn't figure it out. Shimon HaMsuni threw in the towel. Rabbi Akiva threw in the towel. But then Rabbi Akiva heard the following. Rabbi Akiva heard, they asked Shimon HaMsuni, you know, Shimon HaMsuni, you wrote 10 Svarim on all the Essen Shabbat Torah. You gave 200 Shiurim on the Essen Shabbat Torah. What's going to be with all your Svarim? Shimon HaMsuni said, no problem. We're going to put it in the Shemus box. What's going to be with all your Shiurim? We're going to erase them. What's going to be with every word of Torah you ever taught? Shimon HaMsuni said, you know what? I'm moida ala emes. I made a mistake. So what's with all your life's work? What's with your big shita? What's with everything you ever accomplished? And Shimon HaMsuni says, the emes is the emes. And if what I taught wasn't emes, then I'm chayzer. There's no busha in taking something back. There's no busha in saying, you know what, I made a mistake. There's no busha in saying after 50 years of being a marbitz Torah, you know what, I was wrong. Scratch that. Delete button. I'm going to cleanse everything I ever taught. And Rabbi Akiva said to himself, is it possible for a human being to reach the madrega where they have the confidence and the anivus and the midas ha'emes to say that every single thing that I ever taught is not really the derech HaTorah? Is it possible for someone's midas to be so sparkling and so spectacular? Says Rabbi Akiva, what I learned from here is that a Talmud Chacham could reach a level of divine midas that just like the Ribbon Shalom is the Kel Emes, it's shaykh that a Talmud Chacham could climb the ladder of midas and emulate the Ribbon Shalom to such a great extent. Says Rabbi Akiva, Shimon HaMsuni, you taught me. As Hashem Elokecha tira l'Rabbi's Talmidei Chachamim. And there's no machlokes. Even Shimon HaMsuni would be moida. Shimon HaMsuni, by being Peiresh, taught Rabbi Akiva that you could darshan as Hashem Elokecha tira l'Rabbi's Talmidei Chachamim. Says Rabbi Rucham Levavitz, we see from this Gemara the midah of Talmidei Chachamim. I remember I once, in one of the yeshivas that my boys went to, I once sent them a question of halacha, and I got an answer. And I remember I didn't like the answer. And the answer was, this is how we do things for the last 25 years. Okay. But I wanted to know why. Says Rabbi Rucham, you learn from here that the midah of a Talmud Chacham is that every time they learn something, it's ki'ilu they never saw it before. It's ki'ilu they never learned it before. How many times we say, this is my shita, this is my shita. So what does that mean? It can never be rethought, it can never be revisited, it can never be re-examined. The midah of Talmidei Chachamim is that every time they learn a sugya, a gemara, a masechta, it's ki'ilu they never learned it before. Otherwise, says Rabbi Rucham, when Shimon HaMsuni got up to the final Es Hashem Elokecha tira, after he darshaned 1,000 Esen Shabbat Torah, I guarantee you he could have come up with 250 dechukim in that Es Hashem Elokecha tira. And after all we know, Chazak Adam Machzik B'Dibure, what's the likelihood that a human being, after taking a certain mahalach their entire life, would have the openness and the honesty to re-examine everything they ever learned based on one kasha? You learn a sugya. And the derech is, you have two kashas, so you say a chiddush. Now that I have my chiddush, now I have to stuff every Rashi, Tosfos, Rashba, Ramban, Rabbi Baruch Ber, Rabbi Chanan into my chiddush. Why? Because I had two rayas in the beginning of the sugya. Is 3 weeks later, and nothing else in the sugya fits into it. And everybody's saying, no, once I have my chiddush, the ganze shas is now going to fit into my chiddush. Says Rabbi Rucham, the midah of a true Talmud Chacham is the midas ha'emes, of being a tzomeach, of being someone who is growing. Growing means always examining, ki'ilu, I never learned it before. They say the gadlus of the Chassam Sofer was that the 5th time he learned the sugya, the 6th time he learned the sugya, he would start over with no preconceived notions, with no yisoidos, ki'ilu he never learned it before. Comes the Lublina Rav, Rameir Shapiro. Rameir Shapiro has a fantastic take on this Gemara. I'm going to illustrate it with something that Rav Yitzhak Petterberg writes about his Rebbi, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Rav Yitzhak Petterberg, aside from writing the Koich Veyar and the Shareyar, Koich Vayar, they learn a little bit. Shariar, it's kedai to learn the Sefer Shariar. Shariar is an amazing Sefer about what motivated Rabbi Yisrael Salanter to institute the Musar movement. But then you have something called Nesivosar. Nesivosar is basically a biography of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And Rav Yitzchak Petterberg describes the thought process of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter as he embarked at the beginning of his career as a great mind, as a great tzaddik, where Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was trying to carve out a path in Avodas Hashem. And Rabbi Yitzchak says Rabbi Yisrael began his career thinking that the right mahalach that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants is for a person to raise themselves up as high and as great as a person possibly could become. Which would be accomplished, says Rabbi Yitzchak, liyoidei chen, to those who know the secrets of the Torah, that one of the greatest ways to elevate oneself in Ruchnius is to be misboinein and misboideid and to sit in one's Dalet Amos. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter held that despite his gadlus and his chachma, he was going to be master as atzma. He's going to hide himself. People wouldn't know who he was. People wouldn't know about his gadlus. And this way nobody would bother him. And he would be able to work on himself and elevate himself to the highest possible madrega. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter had charata on this mahalach. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says, Loi zu haderech, to somebody with talent and chachma and gadlus to hide themselves and let everybody just go by the wayside. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter quoted the Hakdama of the Nefesh HaChaim, where the Nefesh HaChaim writes that a person was not created only for themselves. Imagine if you saw somebody amassing food, gathering food, and he went to this restaurant and that restaurant and this grocery store, and he fills up his entire house with food for who? For himself. What would we say about such a person? Selfish. Says Rabbi Yisrael, why would Ruchnius be any different? Why would it be any different for a person just to sit in their Dalet Amos, worried about their own Ruchnius, worried about their own Gadlus and Torah, worried about their own Yirah Shamayim? Why is Gashmius any different than Ruchnius? Says Rabbi Yisrael, the Rebbeinu Shalom does not want somebody who has capability and talent just to use it on their own growth. So Rabbi Yisrael ceased and desisted from his original mahalach, sort of like Shimon HaMsuni. He was chayzer, and he went out into the world. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter gave lectures in Paris, in universities. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was a very public figure. Why? Because he saw Loi zu hadarach. Says Lublina Rav, this is Gufa, the Machlokes, Shimon HaMsuni and Rabbi Akiva. Shimon HaMsuni came to the pasuk, Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, you should fear the Rebbeinu Shalom. How should you fear the Rebbeinu Shalom? How are you koina Yirah Shamayim? Piresh! He's separated from Darchei Ha'olam. He went into his Dalet Amos, and he closed the door, and he sat, and he worked on himself. And Rabbi Akiva said no. Rabbi Akiva said, As Hashem Elokecha Tira, if you really fear the Rebbeinu Shalom, and you're concerned for the Yedias Hashem to be known in the world, there's only one way to do it. L'rabois talmidei chachamim. It's not enough that you should be a Talmud Chacham. You have to be concerned that there'll be other Talmidei Chachamim in the world. Like the Chovos HaLevavos writes, even if a person works on themselves their entire life and reaches the Madrega of the Malachei Hasharis, the Rebbeinu Shalom already has a lot of Malachei Hasharis and Shemayim. Chovos HaLevavos says, if a person is mezakeh others, even a little bit, this one, that one, this one, that one, the sum total of zechuyos will end up being much more than even if a person reaches the madreg of a malach. So Shimon HaMsuni held, like Rabbi Yisrael Salanter in his youth, says the Lublina Rav, Pireish midarchei ha'olam, ad sheba Rabbi Akiva, v'darash as Hashem Elokecha tira, l'rabbis talmidei chachamim. But the question is, why Rabbi Akiva? What about the other Tanoim? Only Rabbi Akiva saw the importance of a Talmid Chacham, the godless of a Talmid Chacham. Only Rabbi Akiva recognized that not only do we have to fear the Rebbeinu Shalom, we have to fear a Talmid Chacham. So I'm going to tell you a Ga'inus of Rabbi Yosef Engel. Rabbi Yosef Engel had the chus to be in his kever in Vienna. There's an amazing svarim, the Gvuros, Shmoinim, he has a sefer with 80 terutzim to one kasha. He has a sefer with 70 terutzim for a different kasha. He has a sefer which is not as well known, the Shev de Nechemta, or Shev de Nechemasa. He says an amazing thing. Why Rabbi Akiva? So Rabbi Yosef Engel was expert in weaving together Lamdos, Pilpul, Chasidus, Kabbalah, and he mixes it all together. It's all on an equal playing field. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, there's a klal from the Baal Shem Tov. Listen to this. Kel nekamois Hashem, kel nekamois Sophia. The Rebbeinu Shem is a God of vengeance. Kel nekamois Sophia. What does it mean? Kel nekamois Hashem, kel nekamois Sophia. It says the Rebbeinu Shem's revenge is different than the revenge of a basar v'dam. If a human being wants to take revenge, so somebody insults you, you figure out a good way to get them back good. You know, they insult you when they're least expecting, you're going to give them a really good line. Rebbeinu Shem has a different mahalach. Let's say a person does an avera. Person's nichshal in shatness, in lashon hara. Rebbeinu Shem's not interested in punishing the person. What the Rebbeinu Shem will do, says the Baal Shem Tov, and he gives a mashal. You have a king, you have a melech. Someone insults the melech. So if you have a king who is not so thought out, someone insults the melech, he's a murder b'malchus, you kill the guy. But if the king is a chacham, the king does as follows. The king takes this guy, he elevates him, he brings him close to him. He allows him to appreciate the majesty of the king, the grandeur of the king, the godless of the king, the chachma of the king, until the guy starts to say to himself, oy vay, what did I do to the king? Once somebody appreciates who the king is, then the greatest revenge is the person says to themselves, he has guilt. He feels bad about what he did. That's what the Rebbeinu Shalom does. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, if a person does an avera, Hashem will come and take this person and give him an extra siyata d'shmaya and hasaga in the area where they were lacking, until they say to themselves, how did I do that? How is it possible that I violated this avera? Where the Rebbeinu Shalom, so to speak, gives an extra bina yisera to a person in that inyan where they were nichshal, for them to feel bad and be mischaret. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, Ga'inus, there's nobody else who could figure out who do you need to fear other than the Rebbeinu Shalom. Who could possibly be equal to the Rebbeinu Shalom? But there was a man by the name of Akiva. And Akiva said, Mi yiten li tamid chacham v'anashchenu kechamor. Rabbi Akiva, when he was in Am Haaretz, by the way, the Chassam Sofer quotes the Ramah Mipano, that the Rabbi Akiva was a tremendous Baal Midos. Aber even a Baal Midos, if he doesn't appreciate learning, will hate Talmidei Chachamim, says the Chassam Sofer. So Rabbi Akiva, when he was in Am Haaretz, he said, Mi yiten li tamid chacham v'anashchenu kechamor. So Rabbi Akiva was nichshol in kavod Talmidei Chachamim. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, based on the Baal Shem, Kel Nekamais Hashem, Kel Nekamais Hoifia. When Rabbi Akiva was doing tshuva, the Rebbeinu Shem gave Rabbi Akiva an extra dose of hasaga, of the godless of Talmidei Chachamim. And therefore it's Rabbi Akiva and only Rabbi Akiva, as part of his tshuva, as part of the mahalach that the Rebbeinu Shem revealed himself to Rabbi Akiva, to allow him to rectify his chesaron. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva v'darash es Hashem Elokecha tira l'rabbis talmidei chacham. Comes the Chazon Ish, and Chazon Ish says that we learn from this Gemara a yesod nifla. Everybody wants to know who is closest to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Who is an individual that the Rebbeinu Shalom loves more than anybody else? You know, we have lots of possibilities. We have a lot of people vying for the job. Who does Rebbeinu Shalom love in this world more than anybody else? Who is closest to Hashem? We could pick Baal Midos. Certainly the Rebbeinu Shalom loves the Baal Midos. We could pick a Yarei Shamayim. We could pick a Chassid, a righteous individual, a Tzaddik, a Baal Chesed, a Baal Tzedakah. And Rabbi Akiva had all of these possibilities. But Rabbi Akiva said, you know what? S is only marbe one of them. There's only one individual that we could put up on a pedestal somewhere in the realm equal to the Rebbeinu Shalom Kaviyachal. And Rabbi Akiva could have picked the Tzaddik, the Chassid, the Baal Midos, the Yarei Shamayim. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva v'darash es Hashem Elokecha tira l'Rabbis Talmidei Chachamim. If you want to know who is closest to the Rebbeinu Shalom, who does the Rebbeinu Shalom love more than anybody else, it's the Talmid Chacham. And that's what we're here tonight to celebrate. Younger men who have been Amel v'Yagea to learn a Masechta, to be Koine Yediyas HaTorah, to raise themselves up, to reach the Madrega, the highest Madrega, the Madrega that's closest to the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Madrega that the Rebbeinu Shalom is Oihev more than anything else, the great Madrega of Talmid Chacham. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva v'darash es Hashem Elokecha tira l'Rabbis Talmidei Chachamim. I happened to see in the Yismach Moshe quotes the Arizal. The Arizal says that at Kriyas Yamsuf, so it says Sheish Me'os Rechev Vayikach Sheish Me'os Rechev Bachor. Rechev, the Arizal says, is 222. And Paro subtracted Sheish, which is 6. He made it 216, because we know the Koyach HaKedusha is 216. Because the Gemara says in Sukkah, Rashi and Tosfos quote it, that the Rebbeinu Shalom has 72 names, each one is of 3 oisios. 72 times 3 is 216. So 216 is a Koyach HaKedusha, 216 is a Koyach HaTumah. So Paro took 222 Rechev, he took away 6, he made it 216, and he was fighting Keneged Moshe Rabbeinu until the Rebbeinu Shalom, Yora Bayam, he took off 1 and he made it 215. And now Paro drowned. That's the Ari. It says the Yismach Moshe la'asad lavai, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to do the same thing. What's the name of the Yetzer Hara? Samach Mem Aleph Lamed. 131. La'asad lavai, God's going to remove 1. He's going to make it 130. That's the Pshat in the Pasuk. The Rebbeinu Shalom is going to ride Al Av Kal. Kal Kof Lamed 130. So the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to take the Aleph out of the Samach Mem Aleph Lamed. Adkan Divrei Yismach Moshe. And I wondered, why is the Rebbeinu Shalom going to take out the Aleph? And I saw in the Imrei Noyam of Jacob. Why is the name of the Yetzer Hara Samach Mem Aleph Lamed? Because more than anything that the Yetzer Hara exerts energy in is Siyum Mesechta Ein Lasos. Do whatever you want. You want to learn? Learn. You want to learn Be'iyah, the first 10 blot of Bam Metzia? Learn the first 10 blot. You want to learn the first 20 blot with the Marsha and the Maram Shif? No problem. You want to learn the first 30 blot with Rabbi Akiva Eger? Just don't make a siyum. The Sfarim write Mitzrayim. The Mem is the first Mem of Shas. The End of Mem is the last Mem of Shas. The Yetzer is in between. The Yetzer Hara says start, but don't finish. Samach Mem Ein Lasois. Siyum Mesechta Ein Lasois. But also, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to remove the Aleph, and it's going to become Sulam, Siyam, Mesechta, Lasos. So we should be Zoicha through the Koyach HaSiyam to be Machalish, the Koyach HaYetzer, be Machalish, the Yetzer that separates the first Mem from the final Mem. We should be Zoicha that the Mesechta Yuma should be Megan on you and all of your Mishpachos and all of Klal Yisrael. Ad Bias Koel Tzedek, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.